Hello and welcome. I'm Saad Dino, pharmacist and co-owner of Acton Pharmacy, West Concord Pharmacy, and Keys Drug and Unit. I would like to welcome everyone back to this edition of A Healthier You. Today, we will be discussing the ongoing issue of substance use disorder and addiction, as well as the resources and information we have for individuals and families who are suffering here in our community. With me today are two guests from the Jail Diversion Program, Alia Toran-Burrell, who is the Jail Diversion Program Director, and Clinician, and Coretta McGill, a recovery coach. As most of us know, substance use disorder, and specifically opioid addiction, continue to be a crisis for our community and our nation. As stakeholders, we must work together to prevent addiction and to provide help and support to those battling it. Alia, I would like to welcome you back to our show today. Alia has been a guest in the past. Can you please explain your role and what services you provide in the Jail Diversion Program?
Sure. So the Jail Diversion Program is a Department of Mental Health funded grant. It's a 3-year initial grant, and we are almost 3 years in, which is wild to think about. Okay. And the grant is a collaboration between Elliott Community Human Services, which is a local social service provider, and all of the police departments that feed into Concord District Court. So it's Acton, Bedford, Concord, Carlisle, Lincoln, Lexington, Stowe, Maynard, as well as Hanscom Air Force Base. So it covers a wide range of the community. Okay. And the goal is to address mental health and substance abuse issues of people who come into contact with law enforcement for whatever reason. So it could be a criminal issue, or it could just be somebody who's calling the police for assistance. So for instance, things like if somebody's concerned about somebody self-harming themselves and the police get involved, okay, all the way to things like overdoses, which we're going to be talking more about today.
Absolutely.
And our role is really to support people in whatever they need. So we're not a mandatory thing that somebody has to take advantage of. After an incident happens, we're reaching out, we're saying, hey, we're here to provide support and resources to you if you want it. If somebody doesn't want something now and 6 months down the line they decide they do, they can always reach back out to us and we can help support them. And the things that we support are just as flexible as the needs that people have. So for instance, if somebody is looking for a therapist, we can help connect them to therapeutic resources. Okay. If somebody's looking for substance use treatment, we can help with that. Okay. If family members need support around dealing with a mental illness in the family, we can help with that. So again, it's a pretty broad offering of services that we're able to provide. So about, I'd say a year-ish into the grant, the police departments were realizing that substance use in particular was something that was of concern, was of growing concern, obviously not just in our communities, but nationwide.
Absolutely.
And so we formed, out of those communities, the Central Middlesex Police Partnership, which specifically addresses substance use. So all of these police departments and the town administration as well really wanted to take a more active role in helping the people in town with substance use related issues. So fast forward even more to earlier this year, we had the opportunity to get a recovery coach through Coretta, which is wonderful, and she'll talk more about that. But the recovery coach is really able to support people even more than our program was already doing on anything related to their substance use needs. So okay, it's an expansion of the services that we're able to offer, and hopefully will help even more address some of the needs that people have that might be unmet.
I'd like to expand for our audience what are opioids and how their abuse fits into the broader context of substance use disorder.
Sure. So opioids are substances that, if we're talking kind of brain chemistry, sure, that bind to opioid receptors in the brain. Okay. When we think about opioids in a larger context, oftentimes we're thinking about painkillers. So all the way from natural painkillers like morphine that come from plants and are actually in some animals too, to the synthetic opioids that are created by us in labs. So if you've heard about fentanyl, that's a synthetic opioid. And then there's the middle part, so part synthetic, part not, part natural. And most of those are painkillers that are created for managing pain. So doctors prescribe those. So things like OxyContin, Percocet, Vicodin, even fentanyl is a legally prescribable substance. And then we have the illegal substances, most common heroin. And opioids have existed for a long time. Doctors have been prescribing them for a long time. The reason that we're thinking so much about them now is because 20-ish years ago, doctors started prescribing way more opioids than ever before.
Sure.
They were developing more opioids, and so people were having access to more, and they are potentially addictive. And I, as an aside, there are lots of people who use opioids who are not addicted, who are using them the way that doctors prescribe them. Yep. But for those who, for whatever reason, are not using them, it's become a problem. So we have opioid overdose rates that have been skyrocketing over the past decade or so. Just to give you an example of some numbers, back in 2000, the Massachusetts overdose rate was a little under 400 for overdose deaths.
A year?
A year,
yep.
Yeah. And in 2016, I believe it was around 2,000.
Wow.
So a massive jump, and those numbers have been pretty, you can look nationally and see the same types of increases. So nationally, about 66,000 overdose deaths in the country. Wow. About 44,000 of those are opioid. So 2/3. If we're thinking about how many substances there exist, there are a lot more substances than just opioids. So 2/3 is a pretty high number. And again, that number, if we're looking across the country, is going up. So that's opioids in particular are taking up a lot of our consciousness, specifically drugs. It's not to say that that's the only drugs or substance that we're concerned about, but it's pretty lethal, more so than maybe other drugs are immediately lethal. And so there's a lot of concern around that as well.
Specifically fentanyl. Fentanyl is dosed in micrograms. So those that are utilizing it for not to utilize, for opioid addiction, don't realize that sometimes just a little bit can unfortunately kill you. And so to our audience, fentanyl is a product that is utilized, has been utilized for many years for cancer pain or other aspects of pain under the doctor's supervision. But when it's utilized outside those parameters, that's when it can become deadly.
Yeah, exactly. And it's getting its way into other types of drugs. So
Correct.
People who are taking, for instance, cocaine or LSD, or think of other substances, fentanyl is getting in, and sometimes people aren't even aware of it. And it is, as you say, can be pretty lethal.
I think the word is laced, right?
Yeah.
The fentanyl is being included in those products, and the term is used laced, and it's sad. So how could you tell someone, a loved one, maybe suffering from substance abuse disorders, are there signs and symptoms that maybe a family member could be looking out for to get the person or the individual help that they may need sooner than later?
There definitely are signs. So when we think about substance use disorders, there are a number of criteria that we can see in somebody. So one of the main things is what the effect the substance use is having on somebody's life. So are they losing their job? Are they performing negatively in school? Are they not able to do the things that they once were able to do effectively? So it's really having a negative effect on their well-being, that substance. Other things include pretty obvious things, so seeing drug paraphernalia around, noticing changes in body appearance or body functioning, money missing or somebody needing more money. And then we have physical symptoms as well, so things like withdrawals. So somebody getting sick when they're not having substances, which you can see, if somebody's having the flu all the time, and that might be a point of concern. And I'm not saying that this is only substance use, but it's potential signs. And then tolerance, right? Somebody needing more of something. So those are, when we think about substance use disorders, those are kind of the categories that we think of. And I would say, for people who are concerned, again, not all signs, if you saw those things, wouldn't necessarily mean substance use, but it's good, I think, to be proactive around it. So if you are concerned, knowing, that might be a potential
Okay.
red
And
flag.
I think you and I both alluded to this, and this is not just an Acton problem or a Massachusetts problem or a national problem. It's all. I assume it's all three aspects, correct? And it has hurt not just adults, but our kids as well. Can you discuss that? Do you see that in your programs that you guys are involved in? And you both could comment on that.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not. It's not an age.
Correct.
It runs the gamut from all ages. For overdose deaths, the middle age, so the 20 to 35, I think, are the average ages for the deaths. But we see substance use across the lifespan. The younger somebody uses, the more likelihood that they're at risk for addiction later on in life. So, and when we're thinking about prevention, we really want to focus on delaying onset of use. So if we can delay first use until, I think it's 21 or 24.
Right. Never is the right.
Never. Right.
Right. But somebody has a potential, correct.
Right. And not here to say no one should ever have a glass of wine or something like that, right? There are ways to responsibly use legal substances, which is a whole other, we can talk about that later. But yeah, if we can delay young people's use, they're way less likely to have problems with substance use later on.
So you bring a good point. Can you discuss why, for our audience, why younger ages are more susceptible, if they use at a younger age, more susceptible to continue that in their adulthood? From a brain perspective. At the bottom of everything, brains are still developing up until mid-20s. Perfectly
so anything you're putting into your brain is going to have a way more impact than when we're adults. And the neural pathways are still forming. So if you're putting in something that is blocking the development of neural pathways, it permanently, and sometimes permanently, it changes the way that your brain goes. There is research that's showing that, if you're able to stop, your brain can remold, but not always. And so we really want to make sure that brains actually get the chance to develop fully before substances get in there and potentially block those developments.
Anything more you'd like to add about the jail diversion program or the Alia program, and how could people get access to you and the programs available for substance abuse disorders? Yeah.
If anybody has questions about our program, they can feel free to reach out to me directly. And I think my contact information is.
We will have it at the end
up.
of the show. Yeah.
So anytime. In terms of actually getting help, anytime somebody is interacting with the police, we're reaching out, so they can rest assured that there are supports available if they have police contact.
Okay.
And then with Coretta, we're also doing the same thing with substance use. If people are interacting with police, we're reaching out. But anybody in town can get support from Coretta, and she can talk more about the types of support that specifically around substance use that people can take advantage of, regardless of whether they have police interaction.
Okay. Thank you so much, Alia. Thank you for being here again. Awesome information you're sharing. And now I'd like to welcome Coretta McGill.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. She's a recovery coach, works closely with Alia. Would you mind just explaining to our audience the role of a recovery coach and how it might differ from a traditional therapist?
Absolutely. A recovery coach is more peer-to-peer support than like a clinical support that a therapist would provide to someone. Okay. Oftentimes a recovery coach makes referrals to therapists for people.
I see.
But the role of a recovery coach is definitely more support, general support to someone who's going through getting into recovery from a substance use disorder. Okay. And this support can be anything to just talks on the phone, to helping them set up appointments. Okay. It's really broad, so it can be pretty much tailored to whatever an individual needs.
And how did you become a recovery coach, if I may ask?
So I work with the organization PARI, which is PAARI, the Police Assisted Addiction Recovery Initiative, okay, which originated in Gloucester through the ANGEL program. Okay. But now it's a nationwide program, so they hire recovery coaches and train them as well. To become a recovery coach, you need to undergo 60 hours of classroom training, okay, and now there is a state exam to be certified.
Awesome.
And I'm still in the process of doing that, but part of the certification is you need working hours. So it's all part of the process.
And how did you get involved with Alia and Elliot?
I believe that was because the jail diversion program reached out to the PARI initiative and asked them for a recovery coach. It's a sign-up process. So any town or police department that wants to be involved in it just has to apply for a grant, or it's an application process, and then they get approved through PARI.
Excellent. And may you share with us how your typical day goes? What is it like?
Typical day.
From a recovery coach perspective, of course.
Sure. Well, since I'm part of the jail diversion program, my referrals come from police departments, which we work with, which are all of the towns that go through Concord District Court.
Sure.
In addition to that, I also get referrals from therapists at Elliott Community Health Center, referrals from other local providers, and people can also just walk in and ask for help.
Okay.
And generally, when I first get a referral, I'll set up a meeting with an individual, and we kind of identify their needs, come up with a plan of action. Okay. Everyone comes to me at a different stage in their recovery. And just like Alia made reference to earlier, just because we get a referral to someone doesn't necessarily mean that they're ready to accept help. And that's the biggest part. Someone needs to be willing and ready to start down the road of recovery. Okay. And if they aren't, as she said before, not a big deal, they can always come back. We'll be here. So initially, it's a face-to-face meeting, identify a plan, and the great thing about the recovery coach through the jail diversion program is that I have the ability to continuously follow up. So if that means going to a AA or NA meeting with someone, I'll go with them to that.
Wow.
If that means just checking in through phone or text every week, we can do that. If it's a face-to-face meeting every week, absolutely. Some people I meet at the library to help with applications for various social services. So like I said, it's very broad, and it really depends on the individual and what their needs are.
That's incredible. Well done for your work. From your perspective, what does someone suffering from opioid addiction need the most in order to rehab and recover? And I think you alluded a little bit to the obstacles that they want to do it, but what other aspects do you see that's from a rehab perspective that the person needs to have?
Yeah, they do have to have the will and the desire to make a change and go down the road to recovery. It's not an easy one.
Of course.
And by no means is there one correct way to do it. And a lot of times what happens with my clients is that, we'll try one way. If it doesn't work, that's fine, because there's so many different options. So we can change gears and try a different plan, try the next plan. It also really helps if they have a good support system around them, friends, family, in addition to whatever professional support, therapy, a program that they can follow. But support's the main thing, and that's kind of why the role of a recovery coach was created, to provide that kind of extra added support.
Awesome. What are some of the challenges that you face on a daily basis when working with somebody that's in recovery?
Well, the need to want to do it, as well as setbacks. An addiction doesn't necessarily mean that one day you can wake up and just change your life. It's a process, and like Alia alluded to earlier as well, the earlier someone starts, it's chemistry, brain chemistry as well. And going through withdrawal is not fun by any means. So it's a really tough time in someone's life, and the pull to go back to using a substance is very, very strong and very difficult to work your way through. So one of the tough things is just relapses. And one of the things that I say to my clients all the time is that relapses happen. It's not so important that it did happen, but how you move on from it. So everyone's human, everyone makes mistakes. And that's probably the number one thing that we really encounter.
I'm not sure if you know the answer to this question, but I'm going to ask, what is the percentage of people relapsing that you deal with?
The percentage. you know,
if you're dealing with 10 people, what? I mean, that could be both of you. What's the relapse like? Not that we want to see any relapse, but I know it's out there. It happens.
It does happen often. I don't have an exact percentage, but I know from personal experience, most people have at least one or two. And like I said, not the end of the world. It happens all the time. It's so common, and it's about how they move on from it and recover from it rather than get beaten up over it.
And I think that's the important thing, is that, you know, maybe you fail once or twice, but if you have the perseverance and the willingness to get well, there's people, individuals like yourselves,
and having good support.
Absolutely.
Having the good support systems to pick you up and maybe try a different way of going about recovery.
So obviously, you know, you're developing relationships with these individuals. So how hard is it to see somebody, you know, go through the program and perhaps not do as well as you thought, or succeed so well that you say, yeah, we did it?
Obviously.
So I'm sure there's both spectrums.
There definitely is. Obviously, if someone succeeds, it's great. Really, really good, and everyone's happy, and it's very fulfilling and rewarding to see someone change for the better and sustain the change. If someone makes a mistake, has a slip up, it can definitely be frustrating and disappointing, but there's always another way. And that's one of the main things about a recovery coach, is that, all right, so this way didn't work, so what can we do differently? What can we maybe change in your life, or change what you're doing to help make this work? So it's learn from the mistakes.
And how do you guys collaborate? So, you know, I know that you guys refer back and forth to each other, or, you know, do you see the same individual? Do both of you see the same individual as an extra holding hand, or how does the relationship work between the diversion program and the recovery coach?
So most of the referrals come through the jail diversion program to Coretta.
I see.
So I know what all the referrals are.
Yes.
And we'll definitely collaborate on some referrals. So for instance, if there are mental health needs that I can help out with, I'm working with Coretta on connecting people with those types of therapeutic supports. If there's somebody with really complex needs where more than one person might be helpful, we're collaborating on that. So it's definitely a group effort.
Yeah, we definitely, if we get a referral that's kind of dual, we'll identify which one should be worked on first and foremost, and then go from there.
What's the most successful story you had? Yeah, you could share. I'm sure you've had many, but what's the most, like, you know, what's one that always pops out of, you know, I'm always asked this, what, you know, as a pharmacist, what's the most, you know, things, you know, we take care of a lot of patients and a lot of customers and stuff, so, you know, there's a lot of good stories, but what's the one that pops in your head that says, this person I thought was going to fail, and, you know, next thing I know, they're in college and married and having kids? I mean, I'm sure I've heard a lot of stories like that. So can you share a couple of stories for our audience that you may have?
Yeah, I mean, I think with substance use, this is a larger issue, but success is so long, right? And so, what success looks like isn't an instantaneous thing necessarily, but there are little successes everywhere.
Absolutely.
So if somebody, you know, goes to a therapy appointment or goes to a program and didn't want to go before, that's totally a success.
Absolutely.
Even if, you know, 2 years down the line they have a relapse. You know, if a family member goes to a support group where they've gotten so much support and now finally understand what the dynamics of substance use are, you know, is in their family, and they get that it's not their fault or whatever, that's a success, which has, you know, happens. If somebody is involved in the criminal justice system, which is it's a barrier producing system in a lot of ways, but still gets out of it and, you know, finds a job, which is a barrier for anybody in the system, but if you have a substance use disorder, holding down a job is extra tough. So it's little things like, and maybe they're not so little, things like that happen all the time. I mean, I imagine that's pretty similar for you.
Yeah, I would definitely say even someone going into treatment who wasn't all the way committed to it initially is a huge step in the right direction, because a lot of those programs are built for sustained long-term recovery. So if I get someone who initially was like, oh, hell no, I'm not so sure I want to really go all in, but then they do, that's a great accomplishment. So just like Alia said, the goals are more the goals and accomplishments are more short term, you know, initially, and then you can see the longer term. And whereas the jail diversion program, and I've only been here for 6 months, is still pretty new. We haven't had that awesome opportunity to see the long term quite yet, but the baby steps, it's all baby steps and small goals.
Well said. I think that's what it is that people expect to go from A to Z and like this. And
Yeah, it doesn't
it's
happen
always
like
baby
that.
steps that need to be taken and accomplished along the way.
Absolutely,
So,
yeah, especially because if someone sets, you know, is a habitual user and sets the goal of, you know, being sober, clean and sober, having a job, having a house, having a family, having, you know, all that stuff, you can't do that instantaneously. It takes a lot of time. So we set lots of smaller goals.
Yeah.
thank you so much. Go ahead. Go
I
ahead.
was just going to say, the police, we have to give a lot of credit to the police as
Yes.
well, who were proactive around signing on to our program, and we collaborate with every day around whether it's going to people's houses and talking with them, whether it's, you know, their first responders responding to people who are overdosing, you know, they're on the front lines, and they've been really helpful in working with us on supporting people.
Well, it's definitely a team effort, and I think it
Yes.
takes the community, takes the police, takes individuals like yourselves, LA community, and you know, Emerson Hospital and other facilities where, you know, we have to do all we can to help these individuals, that, and we have to nip this in the bud sooner or later, because it is a
Absolutely.
crisis and we have to end it. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate it.
having
Thank
us.
you.
That is all the time we have today. Thank you again, Alia and Coretta, for being here. We appreciate it tremendously. You guys shared incredible information with us, and you know, we'll have your information at the end of the show so people could know how to reach out to you guys. Thank you so much again for being with us today. My name is Saad Dino, pharmacist and owner of Acton Pharmacy, West Concord Pharmacy, and Keys Drug. Stay well. Thank you so much.